Okay. So I wanted to welcome you formally to this event. This is the first book talk that we've had. And this will not, as I was saying, not be the last opportunity for us to talk about these important themes that we're covering today. So this is brought to you by the Arlington Democrats, and we'll give our own formal introductions in a minute. So I'll just say my name is Alexandra Ritchie, and I'm a volunteer with the Arlington Democrats. And then my two co-hosts, if you could go ahead and introduce yourselves just briefly, and we'll have everyone in the room introduce themselves as well.
Hi, my name is Hannah. I'm one of the other co-hosts, and I, along with Alexandra, am in the Arlington Democrats.
Okay. Thanks, Hannah.
Hi, my name is Gaëlle Gourmelon. I'm a landscape architect and have done some projects looking at space and perceptions of inclusion in space. So I was invited by Alexandra and Hannah to come talk about this topic today.
Thanks so much. So why don't we go around the room one by one, if you wouldn't mind just briefly introducing yourselves and maybe just say, you know, what attracted you to this event?
We might have to call on people because I think
okay.
Everyone's going to be in a different order.
That's right. That's right. Okay, so I'll go in order in which I can see people on my screen. So Latoya, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Latoya Williams. I am on my second life in Arlington. I lived here after undergrad and moved back in 2014. So I've spent most of my adult life in Arlington. And I volunteered with the Arlington Democrats a couple of times to be at my polling place. So that's my relationship with the Arlington Democrats. So I was really interested in this topic. I read Dr. Kendi's book last year and then reviewed it again for this particular session. So interested in discussing with you all.
Wonderful.
Great, thank you.
Okay, and let's see. Next, I see Cicely. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello. Sorry, I'm still at work. So, so my name is Cicely Whitfield. I am a lifelong born and raised Arlingtonian and still live here. I'm a rarity in that form, and I work in a variety of spaces and places. But I serve on the backside and then behind the scenes with the Arlington Dems via the Black Caucus. So I thought I would stop in today and hear this wonderful conversation and see how we could make Arlington a better place for everybody.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Cicely.
Let's see. I think the next person I see is Anita Kretschmar.
Oh, you're still muted.
To unmute. Yes, my name is Anita. I'm an Arlington resident and a volunteer for various things related to campaigns and elections, Democrat related. True confessions. The other confession I should share is, after all this time, I still have not read this book. And I am so grateful for the opportunity to start with a dialogue about it and hear from others what applications would be appropriate in this area we're so fortunate to live in, and to finally get a hold of the book.
Wonderful, thank you. It's nice to have you as well. And Maggie?
Hey everyone, my name is Maggie Davis. I've been living in Arlington for about 8 or so years now. I come from mostly the Midwest, but I've, for the past number of years, been the deputy chair of the Arlington Democrats, and I'm just really glad that this conversation is continuing and that we are having a space to have this dialogue, because I think it's really important as a community in Arlington, as well as part of the Democratic Party in general. And so huge thank you to Hannah and Alexandra for helping put this event together.
Thanks for your support and encouragement, Maggie.
Great, thanks, Maggie.
Okay, and then next, well, we have Gael. So Mark.
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Teal. I've been active with Arlington Dem since I retired from the military in 2017.
Yes, you have. So thank you, Mark, and welcome. And then Lisa, I know we spoke briefly when you joined early, but please go ahead and introduce yourself. Lisa, you're still on mute if you're trying to say something.
Oh, sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, yes. Apologize. I'm Lisa Williams, and I am in Chesterfield County, Virginia. I am a native of New York originally. However, I've been in the state for several years now. I am currently a member of the DPBA. I'm on the 7CD committee there. I am also the liaison for Chesterfield County for the Voter Protection Team. And I am very interested in true history, true American history. And this is a substantial part of that. And that is why I'm here today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lisa.
And JD Spain. Are you, doesn't look like you're muted. We can't hear you if you're saying something. Okay, might have stepped away for a minute. Then in that case, Alex, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Alex. I moved to Arlington a couple years ago, and I'm excited to get involved with Arlington Democrats post COVID, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation to be had.
Great. Thank you, Alex.
And I know, and JD, are you back on? Okay. Well, when he returns, we'll make sure he has a chance to introduce himself. But I'll go ahead and start sharing the screen so we.
Oh, there were two more people who didn't get a chance to.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Alice and Fatima.
Sorry, I apologize. I should have clicked the blue button. Thank you, Hannah. Okay, so Alice, yes, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Alice Hogan. I'm like Cicely, a lifelong Arlingtonian. I feel like we are a endangered species, Cicely, in this community. So I've been involved on and off with the Dems pretty much since I was a teenager. And let's see, just one little anecdote that I feel explains things for me is that I'm just learning constantly and want to be learning so much more. My eyes are getting opened all the time to our past and structural racism and all these things. And I want to increase my awareness. And for example, when my son, who's now entering high school, was a little guy, I had him in preschool, and up the street from the preschool was the famous Halls Hill Wall. And a friend of mine, another mom, mentioned it to me, and I'm like, what wall? What are you talking about? And I was like 35, 40 years old, had lived here my whole life, never even heard of the wall. And when I went and saw what it was, I was like, oh my gosh, thinking, you know, you learn all these things about the past, and here it was right in our own community, and I didn't learn about it at all in school. Nobody I knew said anything about it. And it was just an indicator to me, like there's a whole section that, you know, if it's not your own lived experience, how are you even aware of it? Never mind the impacts and the fallout generations later. So I think we're all kind of trying to evolve in these ways. And so I'm really happy to be part of a conversation tonight and to hear people's experiences. I do apologize. I want to leave my video and mute and stuff on because I have family activity in the background and I don't want to distract. So, but I'm very much here. So thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. And yeah, I agree. Like we're all constantly learning, and this is why conversations like this are so important, because I don't think Alexandra or I or Gael like profess to be experts, but we're all here to learn from each other. Like I mean, you all can teach us as well. So this is why I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, Hannah. I echo your sentiments. And last, well, Fatima. Let me see.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Alexandra. Hi, Hannah. First of
Hi,
all,
Fatima.
hey, I know these guys pretty well. I work, so I am part of Arlington Dems and have been for probably longer than I care to admit. I'm the chair of the Interfaith Outreach and Advocacy Caucus. And Alexandra is a very valued member of my group too. So one of the things that we do there, and what I do in general in my professional life, is focus on diversity and inclusion. I head up a community of practice with an organization I belong to called the Mid-Atlantic Facilitators Network, and it is a community of practice around racial justice and inclusiveness. I've put together 3 programs for them so far, and we're going to have our 4th one. Gosh, I'm sorry, can't remember the date right now, but I can come back with it. If anyone is interested, you can certainly feel free to email me and I can get you that information. If it's available, well, actually, you know what? I'm not sure if it's available anyway, but I'm all about diversity and inclusion. And so I think these programs are, you know, are obviously vitally important. I you know, wouldn't do this as a, you know, professionally if I didn't think it was important. And I salute Alexandra and Hannah, and I know I'm going to butcher your name. Is it Gael? Did I get that right? Okay, there you go. For putting on this program, because, you know, we can never have enough of these. You know, it's a lot of information, and it's and I think sometimes, you know, sometimes we need to hear it a bunch of times. I know that I do, for it to really make an impact. So I really appreciate you guys doing this. So I'm not going to take up too much more airtime. I know we need to get to the program, so thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then let's see, Naomi, would you like to introduce yourself? Oh, I think
You're on mute, Naomi.
Naomi Ritchie, and I'm Alexandra's mother and big fan, and I'm in Austin, Texas.
Yay!
Thank you for joining us.
And let's see, JD, are you on now? We're just having everyone introduce themselves briefly and say, you know, what they get out of today or why they, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. There's 2 JDs on here. I was having some issues with my mobile phone, but yeah, I'm Julius. Many call me JD Spain. I think this is a very interesting conversation. I hope to gain some insight and perspectives, at least your thoughts on how to be anti-racist. I am the president of the local branch of the NAACP, so I want to believe that somewhere along the line I know just a tad bit about what's going on in the world today, and definitely here in Arlington. So again, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join with us today, and I look forward to the presentation.
Thank you so much. Okay,
JD.
I'm going to go ahead and see if I can pull our presentation back up. So just a moment, and oh, let me get back to the beginning. And And everyone see the slides? All right, great. Okay. Oh, and I was, sorry, let's just go backwards. Okay. Minimize this for a second so I can see my screen. Okay, so today we are going to be talking about how to be an anti-racist and apply that to our Arlington context. And just brief note about the format. So we've had the introductions in the room, but we're just going to give our brief bios. And then we're going to lay out our objectives for today. For those who haven't read the book, just going to give a little information about the author and a synopsis of the book. And feel free to add information in the chat if you feel that, you know, there's additional insight about the author that you would like to share with the group. Today, because there are quite a few themes covered in the book, we're only going to focus on 2 as part of the formal presentation, but a lot of these areas do overlap. So we're going to talk about space and race and behavior or behavioral racism. And then at the end, we want to make sure that we leave you with some goals that were included in the book and the accompanying workbook, as well as some actions and resources. And we hope that you will also share with us some of your resources, and we'd love to collect that, you know, through the chat or through a feedback form that we'll also put a link to. So as I mentioned, we'll have a feedback form, and so we would like to have an opportunity to follow up with you since we have so much wisdom in this room. All right. Okay, so I'm one of your co-hosts. I have lived here since 2005. My mom is in Texas. I used to live in Texas as well. And I moved around a lot growing up, so I was exposed to a lot of different cultures. And so my experience is called third culture, when you sort of exist between cultures, because I spent the majority of my life from birth through the age 18 in other countries. I have been active with the local Democratic Party since 2008, and I currently have 3 volunteer roles as area chair, precinct captain, and along with Fatima, I am an Interfaith Caucus member. And then at work, it's not my main role, but I have done a lot of, since 2010, I've been a diversity change agent, which is a collateral duty volunteer position focusing on diversity inclusion training, and to make that part of the culture and the organization. So I love trivia, traveling, festivals, and poetry, among many other things. And then, Hina?
Hi, hi, my name is Hina, as I said earlier. And like Alexandra, I have been here for several years. I moved here in 2006, so I've been here 15 years. And I have been involved with the Arlington Democrats for the past 5 years, and I've enjoyed it. And it's a great way to just become more involved in the community and just, you know, in national issues. And I am well, I'm a vegan, and I'm of South Asian descent. So there are several issues that, in addition to racism, that are important to me, including sexism and speciesism, which, if you're not aware, speciesism is just not discriminating against any species, just because of who they are. And as you can see in my bio, I'm a triathlon enthusiast. So you might see me running or biking on the trails here. You might see me swimming at the local pool, or working out at the local HIIT studio, high intensity interval training studio in Clarendon. So yeah, so that is me in a nutshell.
Thanks, Hina.
Hi, my name is Gaëlle Gourmeron. I'm identify as female, white, immigrant from France. I moved to the US when I was 8. I have a bachelor's in biology, but then I studied public health and environmental health, and then most recently got a landscape architecture degree. So I'm pretty new at this, but have kind of had a lot of different experiences leading up to becoming a landscape architect, and always interested in, the outside world. I've done some research, more on like the hard sciences on sea turtles, but also looking at, job creation in J4 and things like that. So what I'm interested in is just understanding how our ecosystems and our human systems come together. And I'm also part of the BLM task force for my very small DC firm. But yeah, I've been in the DC area for 7+ years now. So not from Arlington, but Arlington adjacent.
Thanks. Okay, so why are we here? This event supports the Arlington County Democratic Committee's inclusion and equity goals. So that's still being drafted, but within that policy states that the Arlington Dems are committed to being an anti-racist, diverse, inclusive, and equitable organization where all members and volunteers, whatever their gender, race, ethnicity, color, creed, national origin, ethnic identification, age, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity, economic citizenship, and/or immigration status, education, or disability, feel valued and respected, and that defining, understanding, and acknowledging systemic inequities and recognizing the intersectionality of those inequities. So not all of us have read the book, so we just have a brief background on that to understand Dr. Kendi's perspective and what he was, some of his messages. Want to talk about the insights we got from the book, and we want to make sure that this is a safe space for all of us to have a dialogue about these themes as they apply to our Arlington context and your individual experiences. And we hope that you will share, as I mentioned, share your resources with us as well to empower all of us to be more effective allies and hopefully stimulate interest in future discussions on social justice, equity, inclusion, diversity. Okay, so Ibram Kendi is a New York Times bestselling author. He is the founding director of the Anti-Racist Research and Policy Center at American University. He's a professor of history and international relations, and he does a lot of public speaking. So you may have seen him on videos online or in different contexts of being interviewed. He's the author of Stamped from the Beginning, The Definitive History of Racist Ideas in America, which was the national book, won the National Book Award for Nonfiction, and the Black Campus Movement, which also won the W. Du Bois Book Prize. He is a resident of Washington, D.C. So quote,
apparently he's in Boston now.
Oh, is he? Okay, sorry, I was reading from the book jacket, so thanks for the update.
Yeah, we got a message in the chat from.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Yeah.
The only way to undo racism is to consistently identify it and describe it and then dismantle it. So that is what he does systematically through the book. Each chapter is a different theme or a different element of racism. And the book reads as somewhat of an autobiography of his own evolution and thinking on these different themes as he was growing up and moving around and understanding what it meant to be a Black man in America, but also coming into contact with people of different socioeconomic status and different geographic locations. And so that he gradually started defining these other themes. So, and he also was trying to point out the racist fallacies, how we've constructed all of these social constructs to just basically divide us. But it's, and telling ourselves myths about, how certain groups are inferior to others. So he's really seeking to debunk all of that and help empower people to dismantle not only those beliefs, but in turn the systems that have been built based on those beliefs. So within the book, the themes that are covered are dueling consciousness, power, biology, ethnicity, body, culture, behavior, color, white, Black, class, space, gender, sexuality, failure, success, and survival. And today we're going to focus on behavior and space. So
okay.
I'm going to turn it over to Hina now.
Okay, I will take it from here. So the first theme that the two themes that we'll go over is race and space. And some of the takeaways from the workbook that accompanies this book or goes along with this book are that there are multiple ways of looking at the world. Some whites avoid Black spaces, and from the book specifically, it says white people have caused hundreds of times the amount of damage that Blacks have. Some of the words that have been unfairly attributed to Black people include monstrous and vicious, and that is an unfortunate example of racism. So there are segregationists. They try to divide between the races, and then there are integrationists, and they try to mix the races together. One of the things that I found, one of the interesting points that I recall from this chapter about race was when Dr. Kendi talked about integrationists, and that it's almost always it's about bringing Black people into a white space, but not bringing or basically keeping them as a minority, not having any of Black people's say none of their culture, not bringing what's of value to them. So basically keeping Black people or making them feel isolated within a white space, keeping them as the minority in that white space. So it's never, or maybe it is, but it's very rare to have it the opposite way, where integration is having a historically Black area and then bringing white people in, but not changing the general atmosphere of that space. We're all familiar with gentrification, which is kind of when white people move into a space, but then they make it their own, kind of push out the people of other races who say used to live there. They make the place supposedly nicer and whiter. Oh, there we go. Okay, so our first poll question is, have you ever looked at the world from a strictly European point of view? And I guess we're doing this, you can...
I'm gonna try to pull up the poll now, so just a second. Oh, oops, all right, can go back.
Can you say more about what that means? I'm not sure what that question means.
Okay. Yes. Oops, am I accidentally advancing the slides? Okay, I won't touch the arrow buttons. So so for instance, I know when I was growing up in school, my education was, it was just from the white European point of view, and growing up, that's just I feel that's just how I thought, where it's instead of say white people, it was say with Christopher Columbus discovering America, that's when I was a kid, I was going in school, that's what I thought, that's what I thought is what was happening, not these white Europeans have come to America and just taken over from the Native Americans who lived there, who've taken over their land. That's not what I was taught. So that's not how I thought. I thought, I thought that typical Christopher Columbus discovered America, which now that I'm older and wiser, I realize that was just one view, and there are so many other more valid points of view. And I'm able to see from the Native American perspective, just how terrible, how devastating that was.
So just to expand on what Hina is saying, let's think about all the ways in which in the US our systems, our education, our buildings, a lot of elements in our society have been designed based on a European approach or model, and that has sort of determined how we judge the rest of the world in comparison to that. So, how are maps designed? What is considered, the New World or East or West relative to what is like from the colonial powers? So, this question is just supposed to stimulate consideration of all the ways in which, through our education and our upbringing, we've been sort of oriented to think of things from, European colonists, founding father.
JD asked a good question in the chat. She's asking for like what age we became more enlightened.
Okay, well, I'm gonna see if I can do.
But yeah, you go ahead and pull up the poll.
Okay, I'm gonna launch this and keep it open for a minute, see if it works. So I think that's everybody, because as co-hosts, we are not able to participate in the poll. So it looks like, well, it's almost evenly split. And it may be the way the question is framed. So I appreciate that people are adding information in the chat. But anyway, so we have 5 out of 9 who said yes, and 4 out of 9 who said no. So I know it does seem like it is a potentially binary question, but there are, of course, no nuances. So thank you for that. I'm going to end this poll now.
JD raised his hand. Did you want to speak?
Yeah, I wanted to say something.
Oh yeah, yes, please do.
And I definitely don't want to take over this, right? So that question in and of itself, I think could be, the results of that can come from many factors, right? Socioeconomic also comes from, again, your upbringing, right? What you were taught, to your point, Hannah, I hope I get it right.
Yes.
Hannah, yeah. But I also would like to know, and I appreciate Obama room. I forgot your first name. You're an Obama. You should change that. Where we're headed in this discussion, but the 50-50 split in the results is a tell-all based upon what I see here, the faces, and that's kind of, I'm just looking to see, because a lot of this, what we get at is formed by early age, to your point, Heina, again, what you're taught at home, right? So let's just curious.
Thank you. Let me see if I can close the poll.
Does anyone else want to share? I agree with what JD says. Like a lot of like how we view the world is based on just based on what we were taught at an early age, like how how we were raised. That can have a strong influence.
I was gonna jump in and say that Alexandra just used the word orient, like orient ourselves. And even that word, orient ourselves, comes from, European map making tradition of, instead of the north being the arrow, it used to be toward the orient. And so you would orient your map by turning it to face, quote unquote, the orient. So even in the language we're using, there is, some European tradition that we just accept.
That's so interesting. I didn't know that. Or it's not something I really thought of, but yeah, that makes sense.
Thanks so much for pointing that out, Bill. I'm sure there are a lot of examples.
Yeah, I was going to add that I've seen a map called the Peterson projection. People have seen that one that kind of shows, every map is distorted in one way or another because it's flat.
Mhm.
It's supposed to show, I think, the actual land mass, and it also has Africa in the middle instead of America in the middle. So it shows the continents kind of in a different location than we are, quote unquote, oriented.
Mhm.
And also size. So you really see land mass and how big places are versus what we think from our other mapping. So I'm not saying it's the map or anything, but mapping in general is such an interesting aspect of this, of who gets to say what things look like.
Oh yeah, very, very true. And I don't remember like the Peterson projection specifically, but I have seen sometimes just different projections from like the one that we always see where North, South America are in the middle. And it's so eye-opening once we see those different projections, those different perspectives.
And I think it also determines based on how those continents are portrayed relative to one another. It may play a role in Americans continually to refer to Africa as a country. That's how large it is as an entire continent.
Yeah, and even the words when we say like up north or down south, it's orientation, right? Like
yes,
southern hemisphere, even southern part of our country, like there's connotation that comes with these things, the way we refer to directions and location even.
And the prime meridian and where Greenwich mean and all of that is based on a European perspective. So I think
Maggie had her.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can't see people hand raised. So
I think I keep getting tripped up on using the word European when I think what we're referring to is the colonizer point of view. And it happens to be Europe for the United States. But if we're thinking kind of globally, it's touching on how your worldview is created through the dominant culture norms you live in. So I just want to make sure we're clear that what we're using the term European to refer to.
Yes, and thank you. That's a good point. The group in power writes the history and determines the language. So yes, the dominant group, which has changed over the centuries.
And Fatima also has her hand raised.
Okay, yes, Fatima, go ahead, please.
This is one of the things that I don't know if anybody has read. I forget the name of the book. I read it so long ago. Of my Middle East history studies, but Edward Said, I think it's Orientalism. That's the name of his book. And he talks about the Middle East and how the Middle East is, well, to the East relative to what, and, just to sort of underscore what we have talked about in terms of orientation. There's that word again. All of the directions are based upon European orientations of the map of the world, and it's a reflection, I think, of how Europeans saw the world. But there's a lot of having said that, there are actually quite a few maps from the Middle East that describe the West, but they don't describe them necessarily as the West. But a lot of people haven't seen those maps. So I'm going to throw that out there as something new to explore for those that have not seen maps, made in the 15th century, for example, or even earlier, which were quite accurate and even more accurate than Columbus's maps. Who knows what history might have looked like today if those explorers, instead of Columbus, had actually taken the step to take the voyage to America, and well, the rest could have been an interest in history. Henna looks like she's got her Frau, like did you?
Como comunidad tenemos la oportunidad de hablar, de pedir y de exponer nuestros puntos y estamos aquí para eso.
I'm sorry.
I don't know what's happening.
Okay, sounds like somebody might have, like our lines might be crossed. I'm sorry, Hannah, you look like you might have had a question. That's why you.
Oh, no, actually, no, I was just gonna say, yeah, that is, I was gonna just comment on what you were saying. I think that is very interesting, and that is something that I think will be good for all of us, yeah, to look at, you know, some old maps from, like, say, yeah, the 15th century, or just maps that are created. I think it was, I'm sorry, I forget now. I think it was Alice who had said there are like talking about the different projections. Yeah, just seeing the world through different perspectives. That would be like map in a map version, seeing it through different perspectives. That would be very, very interesting, very eye-opening.
Yeah, there's one in particular, I'll just throw it out there. It's made by Piri Reis. I'll spell it for you. It's P as in Paul, I-R-I. Second word is R-E-I-S. And this was an Ottoman admiral in the 15th century that under Sultan Suleiman actually drew up these maps. And there were some others before that too. Just some, you know, you guys wanted resources. So it's another one to look at. So, okay.
Thank you, Fatima.
Would you mind putting that into the chat?
Sure.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna move us on. Let's see if I can get that to
Press the arrow button. Nothing moved.
Yeah. Okay, hold on. Okay, well, there we go.
Okay, so here we have I'll expand these and explain each of these maps. Okay, great. Thank you, Fatima. Okay, let me, now I can't get the hyperlink for this first map.
Let's see. The first, let me see if I can do it.
Oh, it's not showing. Oh, there we go. Okay, it wasn't showing up on my screen.
All right, just a second. It should come up in a, and
okay.
See if I can move this toolbar.
Okay, so this first map is just, it's showing the parks and open space in Arlington County, and I was gonna have a copy of these slides afterwards, right? Correct, Alexandra?
We can. I mean, also,
we can share these links with you, that so you can explore these maps on your own. So this first one is just so showing the outline of Arlington County, and then there's a lot of information, so, or very, very small text, so you're not expected to read it all, but just focusing on the colors. So greens for like parks, and then there's some like light brown for community gardens, and just like some other like public resources. So you can kind of explore this and see how those are, how these are distributed throughout the county, and maybe you might notice some trend, or everyone will have a different takeaway. I might see that there's maybe more of a concentration in North Arlington than South Arlington, or maybe more towards the edges than in the center. There's lots of things you could take away from this map. And the second one, how do I get back to the slides?
okay, just a second. There we go.
Okay, I think I can click on this one. I'll open up.
Okay.
Okay, and this second map, this is from this website called bestneighborhood.org. Okay, scrolling very quickly. So this is like, so even though this website is called Best Neighborhood, what's important to, and so this map is kind of showing like how neighborhoods like are broken down by like the majority race. But an important caveat here is like this isn't just to indicate, you know, what is the best neighborhood or what is the least best neighborhood based on race. It's just to give information and to see, you know, how public resources might be distributed, like how they might correlate based on geography. So even though it's not a direct comparison, because this doesn't give the outline of Arlington, this is more just the entire area continuously. You can look at, you know, this map and the previous one that showed the distribution of public spaces to see like, yeah, to see how they might be correlated. Like, are there more resources made available in majority white neighborhoods, and are there fewer schools in areas that are that have majority, say, black and Hispanic communities?
So it looks like we have two people with their hands raised.
Oh, okay, yes. Yeah, please go ahead, whoever. Looks like Alan has your hand raised.
I do, thank you. So I'm Alan Gash. I'm the president of the Arlington Civic Federation. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you.
So our Parks Committee last year actually did a report on this exact topic. It was titled Equity and Access to Open Space in Arlington. So we took the first map and then we overlaid a similar map to what you have on the second map here, basically analyzing the breakdown by ethnic group, basically, and socioeconomic status, and how much open space they had in relatively, relative proximity. And they found some interesting conclusions. It was definitely different by race, and obviously it heavily weighted towards the northwestern corner of Arlington. But the report is available on our website as well as the resolution. And I'm sorry, I don't have the link in front of me, but I can send it to the organizer so that you guys can have it. But it basically does talk about where open space is distributed and how it's related to socioeconomic status as well as ethnicity, and then calls for some improvement and resource allocation based on trying to mitigate those circumstances.
Okay. Oh, fantastic. Yeah, that would be a great map to see that direct comparison with that overlay.
Who would I send it to? I can't pull it up right now, but I can email it out.
Okay. Oh, that's fine. Yeah. Yeah. If you could, you can email it to Alexandra, or to me. I will. I think we'll follow up on this. So you'll have our email addresses.
So Alan, and another opportunity is at the end of our presentation, we're going to provide a link to our feedback form for this event. And so that would be another way for you to identify those resources. You can put it in some of the open text boxes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We were looking for something like that when we were putting the presentation together. So it would be great to have that and share it with others. All right, so I think.
Does someone else have their? I saw before. I said there were two hands. Like I don't see another one. So if anyone else had said something they wanted to add, please feel free.
So after we finish with this map, we were going to talk about some other specific historical examples in Arlington.
Okay. So this is, I guess, yeah, that's all I really wanted to say about this. Like this, yeah, this map kind of just gives the majority race like for in by neighborhood. And we can go back to the slides.
Okay.
Okay. Right click or
yes. Okay, so now
it just I don't know if someone pressed a button, but like now there are captions.
Oh yes, because someone requested that I do that.
Okay, great. So that was it for what I wanted to say, and now I'll turn it over to Gael, and she will talk about inclusive versus exclusive space.
Thank you, Hannah, for the introduction. I want to start with a caveat that says that I'm not going to talk forever, and I'm really only going to touch like a teensy-wincy bit of surface level conversation about this. So this is more for us to have starting points in conversation. But just to start with a little bit about landscape architecture, just for folks who aren't familiar with it, it's basically everything that's not a building. It can be on top of a building, outside of a building, next to a building, under a building, whatever, is landscape architecture. So streets, parks, playgrounds, sidewalks, rooftops, all of these things count as landscape architecture. And I think in the past, a lot of the education was about beauty and aesthetics and, modernism and more art traditions. Now, even though it is a very, very white and Chinese actually, dominated field, it's starting to be a little bit more self-aware about its labor practices, where are we sourcing materials, what impact does that have on environmental justice? And it's also being self-aware of the fact that it's a very white field. So all of this has implications on what we talk about as landscape architecture, and I want to be, upfront about that. But all that to say that some of the stuff that we're trained to think about is the history of a space and the question of who the space is designed for. So let me see if I can advance the slides. I might have to request. Okay, I think I have the request. Oh, no, okay. So I wanted to start with sharing a snippet from a video. I think this, again, is very surface level, but it uses the example, like a physical example of a public space, which is a pool, to talk not just about the space itself and not how the space is designed, but also about what decisions kind of upstream led to the way that we see this space and what implications it has downstream, just to kind of give you a physical idea of space and race. So bear with me, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, it's going to stop sharing the presentation. And okay, so hopefully the sound works. If not, somebody shout at me, but it's just going to be maybe 3 minutes of this video, but I'll make the link available as well for anybody who wants to see it. So again, this is about pools in the context of design and implications on race.
And while several places across the U.S. had already begun desegregating public spaces, by the time the Civil Rights Act was passed, it was too late. After World War II, white Americans left cities for the suburbs in pursuit of the highly commercialized American dream. You know the whole car, white picket fence, home in the suburbs. Now you might be thinking, what does white flight have to do with Black people swimming? Well, the answer is a lot. Once white Americans left for the suburbs, cities throughout the country stopped investing in the upkeep of their public pools. So when Blacks and other minorities finally regained access after the Civil Rights Act, most of them had already closed.
Tens of thousands of private club pools developed in suburban communities, and what that enables suburban communities to do, members to do, is to control who has access to those pools and who they determined would not have access to those pools and the swim lessons that occurred at those pools.
Today, gentrification is the driving force behind modern-day pool segregation. So in other words, it isn't so much your race that determines your likelihood of being able to swim, but your class. For example, affluent suburban communities are far more likely to have access to pools than their city counterparts. Look at the numbers, and you can see why. There are more than 10 million residential pools compared to the 300,000 public pools across the country. On top of that, public pools are disappearing. Since 2009, more than 1,800 public pools have closed across the country. Some rural towns like Hollywood, South Carolina, where Genesis Holmes lived, never even opened one.
Genesis cried out for help because he didn't know how to swim. If me and my husband had gave him swim lesson, Genesis would have made it out.
After Genesis's death, Jennifer Holmes couldn't stop thinking about the what ifs. What if she had learned how to swim? What if Genesis had swim lessons? That's when she came up with an idea.
Being that I lost our baby, I had to do something to where that I could let others know how important water safety is, that what we were taught is not good for us, and why it's important to learn how to swim, to help reduce drowning out in the rural area.
And she didn't stop there. Holmes became a lifeguard and raised more than $15,000 for the Genesis Project to bring swimming lessons to Black children in her small town. It wouldn't take long before the rest of the community noticed. After hearing about Genesis, the Charleston County Parks Foundation gave Holmes $3 million towards opening the town's first public pool, the Genesis Pool.
We should rejoice this day that many lives will learn how to swim. We honor Genesis Holmes.
All right, so that's just a little snippet, and I know it's kind of almost a caricature of public space because it's such a blatant connection and kind of an oversimplification of the question, but it kind of brings to mind kind of the implications of space, not just space as a physical, concrete pool, but all of the political decisions, all the social decisions, all the financial decisions that go into making public space, and then all of the implications downstream for who has access to what resources. So I don't know if we have time for like a very quick reaction from anyone, but if anybody has anybody they want to bring up now, otherwise we'll move forward with the slides.
I could just say quickly that I just put a couple of links in the chat. It sounds like it's really about access, right? Like power and money and policy. It's all who can get what. So I feel like that, folks have had tools, and I work in affordable housing. If people had access to certain neighborhoods, it's control of resources and access to so many better opportunities. I'm just so glad we're starting to really realize this and hopefully, make some serious systemic changes so that we can turn it around.
Yeah, those are really good points. I mean, I think what the video does well, and if you watch the whole thing, it goes a lot into social justice movements that kind of led to a lot of other decisions before that. But I think it does a good point of saying part of racism isn't, it's no longer that there's a sign that says, whites only. It's just that the people who have had the privilege over time to accrue enough money to create this private pool and then have the influence and the power in the government to, push whatever decisions they want made about how the space is regulated. That in and of itself is structural racism. It's not as blatant, so it's harder to point to and have a protest for one specific thing, but it doesn't make it any less, abhorrent. All right, so if we can pull the presentation back up, Alexandra.
Yes.
Julius and Alan had their hands raised as well.
I think Alan had his hand up before me.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was just going to say briefly that I posted a link to the Civic Federation report on open space equity, and it talks about a lot of the things that were mentioned just now. But there's a link there and a lot of information, stats, and excuse me, conclusions and recommendations.
Great, thank you, Alan.
Great, thank you.
So, people know me for not biting my tongue. So I appreciate that video, but right here at home, as I posted in the chat, we've had those very same issues as it relates to pools. And I've been here 13 years and I've learned a lot about Arlington. And we still have that very same problem even here. So today, and it would be my phone going off. I think a lot of these issues that you're talking about today, there are like so many interconnections, right? I mean, it's not just, architecture and, there's the housing piece, right? The education, the criminal justice, they all really are interconnected. And you have to have an innate understanding of all of that first, right? And I guess what I'm trying to get at here is in this medium, this is what we're doing tonight. What is it that we're trying to gain? What do we want the users, the watchers, the listeners to come away with at the end of this period of instruction? I'm just trying to understand that.
I think for my little piece that I'm going to go through very quickly, it's less to talk about necessarily the specific history of Arlington, but just to point to some examples for how to consider space not just as a physical built thing, but space as like the inheritance of decisions that have been made in the past. To empower people to notice things a little bit more, more wide-eyed and, a little bit more curious about history of space so that people will understand that it can be changed.
Yeah. Well, as we all know, at the end of the day, the buck stops with the policymakers, right? And we're the ones that put them in position. So thank you. I mean, that was a great presentation. I see where you're heading with it. I just, first time I got a piece, some instruction like this. So thank you. Okay, thank you for doing that.
Thanks for jumping in. Cecily, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure I heard something correct. You said, so you said, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the point of the piece that you are going to do as it's forthcoming to us is more about not necessarily the specific pieces of Arlington, but I'm sorry, and fill in the last part for me.
Yeah. So oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're okay.
What I'm interested in and what some of the stuff that we learned to do in art and landscape architecture is not to look at a pool and say, oh, that's a pool. It's made of concrete. It's got a fence around it. But to say, why is that pool here? Who got to decide that the pool is here? Who decided that it had to be that size? And part of it is, yes, somebody said, safety regulation is going to be X, Y, and Z. That's set in stone, whatever. But a big part of it is just saying who the users were at the time, who the intended users are now, why, who has access to decision-making of why that pool is located there. And does that still keep up with what we aspire for the space to be? So it's, what I'm trying to do is talk about how when we consider a space, we can't just consider the immediate thing, the immediate material we see in front of us, but all the decisions that led to that, to that structure being there. And once we understand that there are decisions made that resulted in that physical structure, we can then kind of see that that space is not written in stone. People decided to make it that way, so we can decide to do it differently. And once you understand, okay, it is this way because of policy, and it is this way because of economics, and it is this way because of access, then we can look at a space and imagine it differently.
So my understanding is, so what Gael is doing is giving us the tools to understand these spaces and the thinking behind them, and then we can see, like, we can see, like, specific places in Arlington, such as Halls Hill that was mentioned earlier. I think Alice mentioned that, and then how that. And I didn't learn about that or find out about that until just a few years ago, and no one like taught that. And then I also, like, in terms of pools, like Long Bridge Aquatic Center, like that. I mean, just like the geographical location, the prices, it seems like it's made to be accessible just to, like, a certain people. Like, it's not like a very, like, it's not a pool that is easily accessible to the entire Arlington community. So Gael has given us the tools, or is giving us the tools, so we can see, like, our local structures with a different perspective.
Okay, so here's what I'm going to say, and I'm going to leave it at this. If this forum was how to be anti-racist in Arlington, then we need to talk about what the racist policies and procedures and things that got us to the place that we currently are in Arlington.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to move forward from that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not necessarily what is being heard here for me. And I don't know if it's just me, but that's what's being heard.
Yes, yeah, Cicely, I completely understand, yeah, what you're saying, and what we're trying to do. So this is, so as Alexandra
and
had
also,
said at the
beginning, literally, if the question is what can we do to be anti-racist in Arlington, then the answers need to be also a part of the session. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now that's it. I don't have nothing else to say. I'm go back and be quiet.
Oh no,
that is very pertinent to why we showed up today.
Yeah.
If we're going to grow as a county, if we're going to grow as Democrats in this county, then we need to have an understanding of how we got here and to change in regards to this county. Because there are some very serious undertones in regards to Arlington Dems in this county, and American folks and other ethnicities and racial groups, and that needs to be the conversation as to how we are anti-racist in Arlington. And not
exactly. Okay.
Because
we 100% agree with.
So, but there's tons of open space in Green Valley. I'm a Green Valley resident. I'm telling you, we have lots of it, but it's bigger than open space. And if we continue to play around the open space piece, then we're not necessarily getting to the deeper structural issues that we county have caused, and we as a Democratic Party, I would say, have caused in this county.
I wholeheartedly agree, Cecily. And I think the only reason I wanted to show the pool video is not because I want to talk about open space. I think that's a very, very small fraction of everything. I wanted to use the pool, and I think the story is written kind of as a metaphor for, again, we're not looking at physical parks, we're not looking at physical pools. We're considering the fact that when we look at a pool in Arlington, and when we look at even a sidewalk or a decision that was made in any physical space to include or exclude someone, that pool metaphor is to show that there are decisions and there is a history and there are implications. That's the only reason I wanted to show that. I wholeheartedly agree that understanding Arlington specifically is crucial for the fight, for Arlington. So I appreciate your
and that's
comments.
and that's like how Alexandra had mentioned at the beginning of our talk that we're intending this just to be, you know, the first, like the first discussion, like in an like or the first part of an ongoing discussion, like so yeah, we fully expect, we welcome the opportunity, you know, to have further discussions on this, to talk more about how, like, about solutions to be anti-racist in Arlington. So this is just the first in what we hope is a series.
Fatima, you had your hand up.
No, I was just gonna say that, you know, I was gonna follow on, it's been a couple of minutes since we discussed it, but I was just gonna sort of echo the thought that, you know, you know, the resource allocation is driven by the people that are in power, and those people, you know, I mean, it's these spaces are driven by, you know, decisions based on resource allocation. And I forget what else I was going to say. Sorry, I got distracted during the last discussion.
Well, if it comes back to you, just jump back in.
Yeah, I mean, it's really about resource allocation. I mean, I think somebody asked the question, why is this? And I think most people answered it already. I just, you know, I had my hand up and I probably should have taken it down because I was going to answer the question. I think somebody else already did. So thanks.
Okay, so I'm going to go super quickly through this because I'm more interested in the discussion and the resources that people want to share. But like I said, I just want to plant a seed of really questioning, like what JD was saying. It's about housing, it's about policy, it's about decisions that are happening now and that came before. So just very briefly going to talk about some topics that decide, you know, how space is today. And Arlington had the very same thing. Here I'm showing a generic racial covenant. So this, when you think about who gets to live where, who has resources and why they do, something that is important to think about is decisions that were made before we came along. They're not secret. They're not like hard to find. They're present. So when you think about why something has an imbalance, and when you want to make an argument about, you know, this isn't how it's always been and this isn't how it has to be, this is something that was inherited because of racist decisions, you can track down racial covenants. And they have language like the area that I've circled here, that specifically advertises and excludes, it advertises bragging about its exclusion of certain people. So tool there, if you're noticing as you're walking around that there's a discrepancy in access today, you might want to do some digging and figure out, do I have a leg to stand on when I claim that this is a racist act that is inherited from a racist history? And a lot of times it's that obvious. You can just find the racial covenant, find the redlining, and there's a lot of inherited discrepancy there. So I hope that can be, you know, Maggie, you had a comment?
Yeah, just to your last comment and bringing back in the Dr. Kendi's book. One of Dr. Kendi's main premises is that there is no in between. Something is either racist or it is anti-racist. And I think we need to keep that in mind of particularly complex issues such as land use policy, and that in every aspect of the county, race has an element into how zoning has been described. It has had an element into how resources have been allocated, and kind of using the framework provided by what kind of brought us together today, I think might help facilitate more of the conversation.
It's a great point. So I will scroll. Sorry. So again, this is just a very quick example of blatant racism. Close to home in Shenandoah Park, there were segregated areas. So this is just to give another example of like, even the things that we see as a public good don't necessarily have a public good history, and there are implications there. So digging back into the history, not assuming that public always means actually public and always accessible, and questioning what it means for today's public spaces. That also applies to, natural resources, coasts, access to water, whatever it is. There have been, even in what we consider public, some very strict, differences in access. But it's not just things, I'm going to skip this. It's not just things that are far away. It's not just long ago. As many of you probably know, Arlington was set up in part kind of as a political move to be a freedmen's village. And it was then, it was kind of a political statement like, we took Robert E. Lee's property and turned it into what he would least want it to be. But then the same government was also the one that disbanded this community in 1900s. So understanding that Arlington has always kind of used people within its power play, I think is important to keep in mind when we're looking at these spaces. This already has been brought up, the Halls Hill wall that actually only came down in 2019 because of weather, and they decided not to repair it. But if you look here at the spatial implications of a separation, whenever you see, roads that don't connect, when you see the grain and the material of a neighborhood shifting, you kind of have to ask yourself what led to this, and is there actually a racist decision that was made? And in this case, very obviously, yes. But even navigating the space on like a broader, satellite view, a lot of times you can see decisions that were made with a racist mindset. And this was kind of shown by Hannah before, but considering that zooming out, we start seeing different patterns. Zooming in, you might see, here, I should explain, green dots are majority Black, blue dots are majority white, yellow is Hispanic, and red is Asian. So just starting to have pattern recognition is also an important tool for being able to kind of make a case and to make yourself ask questions of why people are grouped a certain way. So there's a really good reading. I just wanted to put this as a resource here, which might answer a lot of the questions that people have had about Arlington specifically, that talks a lot about the North and South divide between Arlington. And it touches on these things that I've brought up, racial covenants, the wall, decisions that are made in public space about who has access and who can live where. So I would check that out. It's in Arlington Magazine, and just search for Are There Two Arlingtons? Some of the very quick design solutions that I want to talk about are things like, this is called defensive architecture. So trying to think of like when you're actually looking at a physical space. So we talked about zooming out and looking at patterns on like a larger scale, but when you're looking at physical space, being aware of things that are actually designed to exclude. Here you can think, it's just a bench, it has dividers, but it's just to exclude people from sleeping on it. It's to exclude people in a public space from hanging out, from co-opting the space. This isn't inherently racist, but it does kind of imply control of the public space as a space for not lingering, for not socializing, for not spending time, which kind of forces a more Eurocentric use of public space. There have been movements, and this is something that could be a resource as well, in landscape architecture and in the way that we consider space, to push for these propositions. So they're focusing on dignity when a space is connected, or when a space is designed, focusing on who you're actually seeing and considering as a user, connecting both the designers and the actual community. So these I'll send out as a resource as well. And another important thing is just to allow more voices when we are considering who's going to be designing our spaces. In Arlington, this, you have to decide all of the time who's going to design this park, who's going to build this pool, who's going to do what. Taking into account the voices that are being brought in, and this is a designer, Walter Hood. He is one of the rare Black landscape architects, but he does incredible work at really bringing narratives that are not necessarily represented in landscape architecture to communities, specifically serving African-American communities in some cases. So I know I was trying to go really quickly. I want to open it up to discussion, but what I was trying to do here is just say, space is not fixed. Space is not determined by a single person. And space really does have, if you take the time to look at the history and if you take the time to look at the actual physical expressions and the patterns of space, you're able to question and you're able to put together a case for really changing something that you feel like is an unfair access or allowance of space. So I'll leave it at that. I want to have time for discussion. Criticism and critiques, totally welcome. Have at it.
Thank you, Gael. That was very, very informative.
Yes, thank you so much. So I'm looking at the time, and I think we've had some discussion so far, but we have a little bit more left in our program. I don't know if people are interested in staying on longer, but we wanted to try to get to our next theme, and we definitely want to make sure we share our resources. So, but in the interest of time, and I don't mean to rush through this. So another theme in the book is on behavior, and some of the summary statements in the workbook from this section is that trying to get away from this idea that from eugenics that any racial group is inherently inferior anyway. So there's no specific gene in Blacks that makes them stupid. Individuals can be irresponsible, but there are no irresponsible racial groups. So we cannot not attribute behavior to whole groups of people. They made a statement that the whole Black race is not affected with post-traumatic slave syndrome. There are common experiences that Black people have in America, but that doesn't preclude them from still succeeding. Lazy Black students exist, but they're not lazy due to their Blackness. And the way this plays out, and the way he talks about it in his own life story, is in the classroom, and teachers automatically assuming that certain students, just based on the color of their skin, are not going to be as likely to succeed. And by making those assumptions, then not giving them the attention they need, and making sometimes it a reality that those kids have unequal access to the resources in comparison to their fellow students. And it also plays out in how students are policed in the schools, and their unequal treatment of students in terms of their behavior. A white student might act out and get a reprimand, and a Black student would act out and is removed from the building and put into a juvenile detention center. So unequal access and unequal treatment because of this racist belief about behavior in certain groups. So a behavioral racist makes people feel, makes people accountable for the perceived behavior of racial groups, and makes the racial groups answerable for the behavior of an individual in question. A behavioral anti-racist makes the behavior of a racial group fictional, and that of an individual tangible. So we have some resource at the end to talk about how to be an effective bystander, but it's to be an effective anti-racist, we have to continually point out this fallacy that this is a fiction, We cannot attribute negative behaviors to an entire group of people. It's not predeterministic, and that there's no scientific basis for this belief. So I just wanted to, this is not new. This is still occurring every day. We have plenty of examples of behavioral racism that are in the news. Some of these are local and some of these are national. So there's one story of a Seattle woman. She was humiliated by a flight attendant over a dirty diaper. She happened to be wearing a headscarf, and the flight attendant discriminated against her. She just got up to dispose of a dirty diaper in the plane, and she was accused of being a terrorist. And not only that, they tried to kick her off the plane. They followed up, and this flight attendant tried to get her on a no-fly list. So she was harassed and she was discriminated against, but the behavioral racist comment that was in the article was you people are always doing. And so it was attributing some sort of negative behavior to an ethnic or a racial group. Another example, a local one, and feel free to put it in the chat or raise your hand if you know anything more about these stories. There was a Black photographer who was, he's a professional photographer who takes pictures of houses for real estate agents and to help promote the sale of houses. And he was sitting in a car in a neighborhood in Arlington, and someone called the cops on him. They thought he was suspicious because he was a Black man sitting in a car staring at a building in a prominent neighborhood. And he said, quote, "I hate to make it about race, but when you find Black men being shot down over frivolous calls, America should be ashamed that this is still going on." So there are a couple articles about that. And then another local one, let's see, I'm trying to figure out how to move my toolbar here so I can, excuse me.
Can I say something about that before you move on? Because I know the photographer personally, and I just want to share with the audience as we're having this conversation. Black photographer says Arlington police racially profile him as suspicious activity. Those of you that may know a little something about it, I mean, based upon what you read and what you heard, I'm curious to know what you think. What are your thoughts? Do you believe he was racially profiled? Because, we're not doing a poll here, but I'll tell you what. Arlington County and the police department doesn't feel like he was racially profiled. And that's the problem. Okay? We have people in positions of authority who still here today don't understand the basics of what racial profiling is, right? How it's, and it's pretty clearly defined. But this Black man, who was a former Capitol Hill police officer, retired veteran of the U.S. Army, and doing his job on Orm Street, Southgate, in South Arlington, was performing a job, helping a white lady, a family, sell their home and taking photographs. And to your point, what you mentioned, someone saw him on the street and thought that he's in the wrong neighborhood, the wrong street. And because we have failed to do anything about that and hold anyone accountable to date, trust and believe that there's still people of color walking around in Arlington wondering every day, is it going to be me next? Because we failed to take any action on it. That's the reality. So I'm glad you made that out there, but I just want to give some more context because I do know the gentleman personally since that event, and thanks for highlighting that, okay?
Thank you so much for providing that additional context. Yes, it's important not to just focus on headlines, but to be able to follow these stories as they evolve to see what actions are taken in response. And then the last one, okay, I'm just trying to move this over so I can read. So Arlington athletes, the headline was Arlington athletes want answers after spit and racial slurs flew during football game. So one of the quotes from the coach was that multiple players came off the field saying that they were spit on and called racial names. I told the refs what was going on and nothing was addressed. And so what happened here is there was feel free to speak up if I get any of these facts wrong, because I don't have the article up in front of me now, but there was an Arlington team playing against, I think it was a Fairfax team, and the Arlington team members, some of them told their coach that they were being harassed and discriminated against and spit on and heard these racial slurs. And while they tried to contain it, some of the players were sufficiently provoked that they tried to defend themselves verbally and physically. And because it led to a physical fight, they were then disqualified from playing in certain games. And so even though the other team was the aggressors, because the team that was discriminated against fought back, essentially, they were the ones who were punished because that was built into the policy. If you start a fight, that's not sportsmanlike behavior. They weren't kicked out of school. Their school still supported them, but this policy clearly took the side of one group of people. And so, as a result, when we have examples like that, then students do not automatically feel safe. And it's important to be able to call out these behaviors and not say this is acceptable in form of just, taunting the other team. This is something that we have to denounce and call it what it is. It's racial, it's racism, it's racial behavior, and it has a long history, and it's not acceptable. Does anyone have any additional context for this story or similar stories that you've that you're aware of?
So this is Cicely, and I've transferred to my car. The only thing I will say about that story that really should be a statement is that the students were Wakefield students. And as a lot of people know, Wakefield is one of the more diverse high schools in Arlington. And so the students that were from the other school were majority white. This is a long-standing situation when it comes to Wakefield students playing other schools within the district and otherwise, because it is kind of a known factor. I'm just trying not to die out here in the street. That Wakefield is the Black school in Arlington. So, for lack of better words, yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate that additional context as well. Just let's see.
Alexandra.
Yes.
So, these are 3 good examples, but there's countless examples. Again, I've only been here 13 years, but I've traveled the world and I've been around the block a little bit. We can go down this road with even the swastikas, right? That were, and I know we've talked a lot about our Black communities, but there's a lot of communities here in Arlington that have been disproportionately affected by discrimination and outright racism, right? And I always say at the end of the day, if you see something, say something. And if you sit idly by and you don't do anything about it, you're somewhat complicit in all this and condoning this, right? So there's a lot of work to be done, remains to be done. But I just want to highlight there's just a number of issues that are going on in Arlington right now that need to be addressed.
And I think we probably all recall earlier on in the pandemic when there was the family in Arlington that tried to support Black Lives Matter and had used sidewalk chalk, driveway, and a neighbor called the police and asked them to have it removed as graffiti.
Yeah.
Very, very disheartening to hear that was happening in Arlington. And I know it's just one of a lot of issues, as you mentioned, we still need to address.
I would follow up on the sidewalk chalk, and maybe JD, it's an example where the county did jump on that right away, immediate apology, the people went back, it seemed like they tried to address it, acknowledge it was not necessary, it was hurtful, it was so many things. And at least they did something. It's just so disheartening to hear that nothing has happened about the photographer. And I don't really know, does anybody know what happened with the football team? I think it was Marshall High. Did something happen with those students on the Marshall side? Does anybody know?
I didn't find any additional reporting that showed that they were disciplined.
Nothing happened. Nothing happened. Nothing at all. Sorry.
That's really
I'm driving, but nothing has happened to those students. Those students actually received a ton of support from their parents and from their school and from their system. Whereas our kids were expected to stand by and just kind of let something happen to them. And to be quite frankly honest, if the school necessarily felt, if the coach had necessarily felt like he had the support at that moment when his kids said that, they should have walked off.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily know if, that's a Cicely opinion, but they should have walked off. And if he had felt some support from the school system, then maybe he would have been able to do that. But yeah.
That is so disappointing. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay. Let's see. Do I still have, okay. So just in the interest of time, I guess I can still try to pull up the poll question. Let's see.
Maybe we can instead of having the discussion about this now, we could invite people to give their example of that in the feedback form.
Okay. So I think I shared the poll. Is it up? If you want to do that quickly, feel free to answer the poll question. Put information in the chat, or you can put it in the feedback form. So then
I just, can I say something?
Sure.
I mean, I don't mind guided discussions, and I don't mind having a conversation, sometimes courageous conversations as it relates. If we're on a time hack and we got to move on, I have no problem with that. But I think this is will be one of those important questions. Maybe we can have a follow-up. Answering the question in a survey and then taking it somewhere is only important, is only relative if we're going to address the answers in another form, right? So,
yes.
Right. So if we're going to have a conversation now, we're going to have a conversation, not, kick the can down the road. And I don't think that's the intent by the young lady, but I think this is worthy of a conversation to hear people's experience. Not
yes,
so much
it is worthy, and I don't mean to do that. It's just and I'm only saying in the interest of time,
okay,
because
great.
it is yeah. I mean, of course, yeah. We should continue this conversation. This discussion isn't meant to be an isolated event, and we should absolutely talk about this again.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Yeah, no, thank you for that feedback, because we are really looking for some direction on which theme or topic would be most helpful for us as a group, as a community, whether it's us specifically organizing it or other members of the community or other members of the Arlington Democrats. We will definitely take your suggestions, and we want to honor your stories and your experience and don't want to minimize it because of time. Okay, so I think I need to end that, and I'm sharing the results just so you can all see. So most people, a couple people definitely believe that they have experiences. Some people maybe not sure about how it's defined. Stop sharing that.
And I think our alternate poll questionnaire that could also go along with the discussion that we would have at the next talk, along with people's experiences with behavioral racism.
So now that we've presented a number of different angles and we've had some discussion, we just wanted to try to summarize some of the things that we've either already presented or some other resources that we found. This is by no means an exhaustive list. It's just we try to find some things that we thought were relevant. And so we were really looking forward to incorporating the resources you're sharing into a larger document that can be made available to the community. So from Space and Racism, we talked about stop looking at the world from the European point of view or the dominant culture point of view. Don't believe in either integrationist or segregationist ideas, because you really have to think about the value of the individuals and the different cultures. Help and encourage. From the book, they also spoke about, an action item you can do is help support Black business owners or people who are trying to get into business to overcome or to change all of those policies that we were mentioning about, redlining, access to loans, where they can live, building up intergenerational equity and wealth, and keep blocking. And to not relegate, there was a statement made in the book about the notion of ghettos as sort of a curiosity or animal zoos, and we really need to understand who our neighbors are and the history and what everyone has contributed. So Gael's office at our group has compiled some reading resources that are available on this link about race and space, and to think about in context of the BLM protests. The video we watched is, the link is here. We recently had the opening of the Black Heritage Museum of Arlington, so we're encouraging everyone to check that out in person if you can, and online. There are resources. And then we provided information about the Arlington Black Chamber of Commerce, AAPI businesses, Latinx businesses. In the pandemic, we're trying to celebrate the cultures and neighborhoods and the richness and diversity of Arlington. We really can't succeed without any of these groups. So we want to make sure that we are working together to make everyone successful and address the inequities that have been put in place over centuries. And and then on the behavioral side, we want to make sure that we abandon the practice of behavioral racism and just so dispel that myth. If you see a person who is psychologically undervaluing themselves because of racism, because of what happened to individual treatment and success in succession over generations, then there are various ways to provide support. And then we need to, again, change our mindsets and our behavior and our policies and our practices that suggest that, Blacks are responsible for crime. The way a lot of headlines are written, the way Blacks and people of color are characterized in the news, it really seems to reinforce this idea that there's an other and they're responsible for the crime in society, but we need to get our facts. So in Arlington, there are some resources that had already been provided at the county level. Let's talk about race info and articles. There was a partnership with Challenging Racism. There is an event happening this weekend, specifically challenging racism in the school context. And then there's a great organization that I have worked with called Defend Yourself. And they, over the last few years in particular, they have developed more targeted self-defense training. And so they have training on empowerment and self-defense for people of color. And then there's also other training for active bystanders. So if you witness any of these racist behaviors, so this is just on a case-by-case basis, but if you know the history, but you also assess the situation, how you can be an effective ally in a particular moment, these are some great tools for you to know about. And then, Hannah, could you do me a favor? And well, maybe I can do one. If somebody could grab this link and put it in the chat, This is our feedback form. And so it's a Google form. It should be pretty easy. It's just asking about your experiences with this event, both sort of on the technical side and also on the substance, did we hit the right mark, and your suggestions on how you would like to be further involved in furthering the conversation and, through what means. We certainly don't own this conversation. We're just the first three who were starting based on this particular book, but there's so many other ways that we can, so many other directions we can go. Okay. Moving. So
Looks like I can't. I'm not able to.
Oh, okay. All right. Let me see if I can do it then. All right. So
while Alexandra is pulling that up, I just want to take a second to thank everybody for their time and attention. And I, at least speaking for myself, I'm totally no expert on this, so I appreciate everybody's comments and feedback and critiques. And I see JD has his hand up, so I'll yield the floor.
No, don't yield to me.
I just wanted to thank everybody for their time. That's it. But please go ahead.
I guess we're coming down to the end, and I just had a few words. First, Alexandria and to the other two young ladies, thank you for putting this together. And, we have to start somewhere as a collective. My only concern at this point as you move forward, because these are conversations that need to be had, and I can appreciate that you talked about challenging racism, but there's so much going on in Arlington right now as it relates to, racial equity, inequalities, right? And everyone wants to do their part. But I think it's very important that we have really good allies, right, as a collective and moving forward. So I hope that your inclusion and equity, I make some notes, in your outreach and visibility teams at the DIMS, right, play an active role in what you're doing here, because they need to be involved, right? I think as you go and do this work, I have been a part of a lot of work that's been done. I know Callaway United Methodist and Rock Springs Church Congregational did a 7-month training period on courageous conversations. And it was well attended and it was very substantive. And a lot of what you're talking about today, they talked about, right? In large groups and breakout rooms. So this is a conversation that has to continue. It could always be improved, but I thank you for, I wanted to come here tonight, just not because I'm part of NAACP, but actually see what you're trying to do. And I think you're on the right course, and I commend you for your efforts tonight. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, JD.
Yeah, we appreciate it. And we want to recognize that there is a lot of great work happening, that there are, the NAACP and some of the faith groups that you mentioned that are having more in-depth discussions. And so we're not trying to suggest here that we've invented anything or take credit for, sparking the only dialogue. We just thought that there might be a way to use some of the themes from this book to connect with different audiences in Arlington. And we would be delighted to join other events that are happening and provide whatever support is considered the most meaningful. And when I say we, I think I'm speaking for the three of us, but I think really collectively in the Arlington Democrats, the outreach, it's not meant to be one way. We want to be able to have, those real relationships with our neighbors. Maggie, I don't know if you have any additional.
So I apologize. I actually had to drop off for a few minutes because I had a quick emergency. Everything ended up being fine, but my friend's building was on fire and I had to check on her dog.
Okay.
So I deeply apologize. I unfortunately missed probably the past half an hour.
Okay, so that's we're thanking everyone for participating and talking about what might come out of this particular conversation, how it might help facilitate more conversations on things we talked about today, or help us connect with other movements and resources that the community is already working on, so that we as Democrats can provide meaningful support. So I was just wondering if you had any additional insights or thoughts about what the Arlington Democrats could do in this space.
Well, I think, and JD might have touched on this when I kind of step back in, the biggest thing is having this conversation and making sure this conversation continues and evolves. And so sharing resources, but also integrating it into some of our existing practices. And so I think the next challenge or step for us is to start figuring out how to bring more members of the Arlington Dems into this conversation space.
Thank you. And I see that Jill has raised her hand. Jill, did you have a comment or a suggestion or question?
Sure. Yeah, I just wanted to thank you all for this conversation, and I enjoyed the examples that you had and suggestions about the way that we can act as anti-racists and sort of combat the behavioral treatment and the other examples you had, but sort of bringing it back to swimming pools, thinking about growing up here in Arlington and the differences between the different swimming pools in the area. I don't think that you can attribute the differences just to having a pool nearby. Because I will say that, I know gay and lesbian couples that were not feeling welcome at some of the private pools that, live right by Upton Hill, that would choose to spend every weekend, they lived right by Overlea and they chose to spend every weekend at Upton Hill simply because it was a place that they felt like there was less discrimination. So, there is a history of all sorts of discrimination at some of these private pools. I also think that the way that children are treated at pools in terms of making them feel welcome comes down to, it's the behavioral policing. Do the, Latinx and Black children want to play loud boomboxes by the pool? That was always a huge issue. And Upton Hill was the only place where kids could play music by the pool, that anywhere else that was something that was forbidden. Or whether kids are allowed to swim in clothing that is technically not swimwear, because a lot of the immigrant kids didn't have swimsuits. And so they would hang out by the pool in a t-shirt or shorts, but, are you allowed to go into the pool wearing that? So there are all these different rules and things that happen that, that impact whether people of particular races feel welcome at any given pool. And those things play a lot into, I think, the pools that people, go to, in addition to whether it's a private pool and whether you have to be on a waiting list and pay money for, for subscription and whatever too. But, there were a lot of people in North Arlington that did use Upton Hill, even though it was not in the neighborhood, because it was a place, where they felt more comfortable. And, I grew up in North Arlington, and am white. And I went to a school where I was the only white girl, but my family, we went to Upton Hill because that's where my friends were, because that was, where there was more diversity and where I would go to the pool with my friends, as opposed to going to one of the private pools that the kids at my school wouldn't have had memberships of. So, there's a lot going on here, but I think that in terms of the way that kids are policed for running around a pool or things like that, all of that plays into whether children feel welcome. And there, I think, all sorts of ongoing discrimination that aren't just about segregation, so that's kind of, that's the starting point of it, but that's not to say that discrimination at the pools, ends with desegregation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think you make a really good point that a space, a physical space also determines like how we, or the ruling of a physical space is integrated with the actual, you know, physical pool. It's not just about the pool, it's about how we choose to govern the pool. And I would challenge folks to not just think about a pool as having rules and expectations of how we belong, but everywhere we go, using that same like framework of analyzing a very specific thing like a pool and using it when you're out in the street, when you're out in a shopping mall, when you're out anywhere as a lens of saying, okay, I now see all these rules or all these policies or all these you know, requirements in what I'm wearing or what I'm saying or how loud I can be, and how that might make someone feel excluded or included. So that's a really good point, Jill.
So I think these are all really wonderful examples. You know, whether you've lived here a few years or many years, not all of those things get captured in the books that are in the history of Arlington. And I would hope that collectively we would be able to identify all of these policies and rules and laws that are inherently racist or discriminatory, and maybe be able to catalog them and prioritize which ones can be changed. And I know we are sometimes limited by the Dillon rule of what we can change locally, but to at least have a document of all of these different instances and contexts and spaces where this is playing out. Schools, neighborhoods, housing, broadband or internet, all of those things. So I'm sure that you're in the different groups that you're a part of, that you're discussing these things, and I would love to know if there is a site being developed to track all of that. So thank you again. Thank you for staying on 30 minutes beyond the time that we had allocated. This is important. I have learned a lot tonight, and I think that's one of the greatest values of just putting this out there and bringing people together to have this conversation and see how much further we need to take it. So,
yes, I'm going to second that. Yeah, thank you, everyone. This has been very valuable, and we'll like all these resources, all these links that you provided in the chat, and we'll send these out to everyone. And again, if you haven't already, please fill out the feedback form so we know what kind of direction we should go in for our next of what's hopefully a series of discussions.
And just not sure if I put the correct link there. I'm going to see if I can copy it now. Still not letting me do that. Maybe if I'm able to.
Or if it doesn't work now, are we able to just email the participants?
Yeah, I can do that if everyone, I think we have everyone's email address because you had to sign in to join, but let me just try one more time in the chat so that.
Okay, Alan said that the link works.
Yes, but we will email it to you as well. So thank you again. This has been really wonderful and stimulating, and there's a lot more work to do. Oh, did we have more hands up, or were you?
You can tell when it's 30 minutes past time and you still have this many people in the room that you're having a pretty good conversation. So
very true, very true. Well, again, yeah, thank you everyone for staying on longer than longer than 8 p.m. Really appreciate it. And I don't have anything further to say. So I'll just say good night to everyone, and Alexandra, Gael, or anyone else wants to say anything.
No, I think, yeah, I think it's been a great evening, and I appreciate your time and your candor and keeping us honest, and look forward to having many more conversations, and hopefully someday we can all meet in person once we feel it's safe enough to congregate in a group. And so if you have any suggestions about what would be a meaningful space for us to have future conversations, or if you prefer the online forum, please let us know that as well. Okay.
All right, great. Thanks, everyone. Okay, good night.
I want to thank my co-hosts, Hina and Gael as well.
I think we're the only ones left. All right, good night.
You're on mute, Mom.